In this video, I'm doing a speed comparison of what it's like using the RingPlus network at different speeds. So all the way on the left, we have an iPhone at full LTE speeds, which is about 7 megabits per second down. Then we have a 512 kilobit per second throttle, a 256 kilobit per second throttle, a 128 kilobit per second throttle, and lastly, a 64 kilobit per second throttle. So you can see that with the speed tests that I'm running right now, and they pretty much just confirm the speeds of the network. So first up is a basic sending and receiving email test. All speeds passed this test pretty much with flying colors because it was just a text-based email, very small amount of data, everything loaded super quickly. Except for the 64 kilobit per second throttle speed, that one took a little longer, even for a text-based email, so surprisingly slow. All other speeds worked fine for receiving this really small email. Again, it's few kilobytes in data size. Next up, I tried receiving a picture email. You can see the LTE speed test finished first at 2.8 seconds of downloading the picture. Next up, we have the 512 kilobit per second throttle speed. You can't see a loading status bar for this one, but it does. The image does load next at 18.3 seconds. Then if you speed up everything else to 8 times the speed, we have the 256 throttle finishing at 34.3 seconds. The 128 throttle finishing at 1 minute 13.4 seconds, and lastly the 64K throttle finishing at 2 minutes 34.8 seconds. Next up, I tried to send the image at full size, and for this test you can see a progress bar at the bottom of the screen indicating the progress for sending the email. So per usual, we have the LTE iPhone finishing first at 18.7 seconds. Then we have the 512 kilobit per second finishing at 23.7 seconds. 256 kilobit per second finishing at 49.6 seconds. Again, everything else speeded up 8 times. We have 1 minute 40.6 seconds for 128 kilobits per second. And lastly, the 64 kilobit per second speed is finishing with a time of 3 minutes 18.3 seconds. So I did something similar. I tried sending an iMessage. This is a picture iMessage, the same picture I sent in the email. Again, just trying to see the speed tests. And for iMessage, when you're just sending text-based iMessages, all of the speeds worked fine for that. Okay, first up, again, we have LTE finishing with 12.5 seconds. Then we have 512 kilobits per second finishing with a time of 15.7 seconds, 256 kilobits per second finishing with 34.2 seconds, 128 kilobits per second finishing after 1 minute 11.4 seconds, and lastly the 64 kilobit per second speed. Even sped up 8 times, it still takes a while, and it finally finishes with a time of, wait for it, it's still sending. With a time of 5 minutes, 26.1 seconds. Next up, I did a YouTube test. The LTE passed with flying colors, started playing the video after just 2.2 seconds. Next up, the 512 kilobit per second speed loaded after 16.9 seconds. Again, speeding up everything by 8 times. We have the 256 kilobit per second speed finishing at 43.6 seconds. The 128 kilobit per second, which failed to load the video info and related videos, but it did start playing the video after 2 minutes, 20.4 seconds. And the 64 kilobit per second speed, which I would absolutely not recommend for video whatsoever, finished after 3 minutes, 52.2 seconds. So next up, I tried loading a text-based website, reddit.com. You can see some surprising results here. The 512 kilobit per second speed loaded after 1.1 seconds. Then we had the 256 kilobit per second speed loading after 1.8 seconds, then LTE at 2.2 seconds. Then we had the 128 kilobit per second loading at 13.1 seconds. And again, lastly, the 64K loading at 2.2 seconds. So all pretty great for loading text-based websites. For more complex websites like the Apple website, LTE loaded the fastest at 1.5 seconds. I forgot to test the 512 kilobit per second speed. And then all of the others kind of take a little bit longer because the Apple website has more images, more animations. You do have the 128 kilobit per second loading at 18.5 seconds. And surprising enough, the 256 kilobit per second took a little bit longer for this test. I don't know why, something kind of tripped it up while I was loading the page. I mean, the page is still usable. Anything that's loaded will work, but it did take longer than expected, with the 64 kilobit per second finishing even before the 256 kilobit per second. So pretty much everything works for web browsing. I personally would appreciate at least 128 kilobits per second for browsing the web, and obviously anything above that works really well and loads everything nice and quick. So there you have the 256 kilobit per second finishing with a time of 1 minute 5.1 seconds. Next up, I tried streaming music, and for all of them, they pretty much started playing at the same time. LTE, everything worked great, sounded excellent. At the 512 kilobit per second speed, again, everything worked great, sounded excellent. Again, at 256 kilobits per second, everything worked great, sounded excellent, and loaded. For music, things really started to break down at the 128 kilobit per second mark. You can see the music starts playing, but then pauses and does not stream fluently enough. So if you are streaming music, you are going to need at least 256 kilobits per second of download speed in order for there to be no playback issues. Okay, that wraps up this video. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you found it interesting, and I'll see you next time.